best not listen to this story. In Australia, between men working together in the outback, that word's as likely to pop up as often as is a kangaroo. I'd been working on the station about 3 months. Alan put in a small field of wheat each year just in case the rains came in time. The crop was good that year, and we'd just finished combining the whole 50 acres. I didn't want to back the wheat combine into the big shed. I didn't have a clue how to back up an articulated vehicle, and I'd only just learned to drive the damn tractor the day before, and I was really tired. "Just do it, Yank," Alan screamed at me. He was tired too. So I did it, right through the rear wall of the shed. Alan screamed some more and told me what a dumb fucking wet behind the ears jackaroo I was. He started to laugh then, so I figured I'd still be allowed to take my meals in the big house with the rest of the family. It had rained in the outback. It rained a lot, and a miracle had happened almost overnight. The dusty red paddocks had turned a deep vermilion green, and Alan and I had to go out each day and see if any of the cattle had gotten a bloat, a kind of fatal indigestion cows sometimes get from eating too much fresh green grass. When we found one lying in the deep grass, moaning and puffed up like a big cow balloon, Alan would pull out a long, thin, rapier-like instrument and stab them in the rumen, that kind of anti-stomach cows have where grass goes before it's sent on to their second stomach for proper digestion. There'd be a loud whoosh, and half-digested grass and goo would come gushing out of their sides. Then they would stop moaning and get up and start eating grass again. Alan had promised to take me hunting roos some Sunday. I was never really a hunter. I'd shot plenty of rabbits since I'd been in Australia. And when I was a kid, I shot sparrows and starlings and once a robin. I was ashamed about the robin, but no one ever knew till now. I don't know exactly why I wanted to shoot a kangaroo, but I did. So that Sunday, after checking the cows for bloat again, Alan took me out in his bakkie, an old Land Rover, to shoot one. We drove several miles through the lush green grass. The acacias were in bloom, all covered with zillions of tiny flower balls that scented the air with a fragrance, something like old lady's powder. We startled an emu hen with a batch of chicks in tow. A 7-foot black snake crossed our path, and we saw several browns as well. Both were deadly poisonous, and we left them alone. I don't know why most snakes in Australia are poisonous, but they are. Finally, we spied a mob of roos resting in the shade of a big gum tree about 100 yards off. Alan stopped the bakkie and told me to get in the back. He handed me a French-made rapid-fire .22 with a tubular magazine that held lots of bullets. "I'll cut out a big buck and I'll chase him. You shoot him. Try to hit a vital spot because a roo can take a lot of hits and keep going if you don't hit a vital spot." He didn't tell me where the vital spots were, however. Alan got back in the bakkie and started towards the roos. They all looked up at the same time and started off at a fast gallop, hip-hop or whatever. They were really fast, but Alan had done this before and knew how to cut out the biggest buck. Alan kept right on his hopping ass for several miles. No one ever accused me of being a marksman, but that French gun could shoot as fast as you could pull the trigger. There was no road. The bakkie bounced and the roo hopped, and I kept pulling the trigger. I managed to hit him several times by luck, I think, but not once in that vital spot. We came to a 5-strand barbed wire fence about 4.5 feet tall. The roo cleared it like it wasn't there and kept on going. Alan stopped the truck and said, "That's it, Yank. There's no gate for a mile." "But the roo's wounded," I said. "We can't just let him hop off and die." "If you want that fucking roo, you climb the bloody fence and go after him. I'll wait here in the shade of that gum tree over there." I jumped down, reloaded, and squeezed my way through the strands of barbed wire. It was hotter than fuck, and I was soaked with sweat. The flies, thousands of flies, were covering my back and getting into my eyes and my mouth when I opened it. I started after the Roo and got to within maybe 100 feet of him. He just stood there, panting and bleeding and looking at me. I knelt down and I steadied the rifle on the stump of an old acacia tree and aimed very carefully. I got off 3 or 4 shots and he leaped straight up and did a kind of flip, landing on his side. Then he got up and started running again. I lost sight of him, but there was plenty of blood to show which way he'd gone. I wondered how a kangaroo could have so much blood in him. After a few minutes, I found him standing beside a dam. A dam in Australia is a pond dug right out of the flat terrain with a borehole and a windmill beside it that runs whenever the wind blows and provides precious water to the rancher's sheep and cattle. When the Roo saw me, he stepped into the dam and swam out to the middle. I could tell from the way he'd push off the bottom and bob up and push off again that he was in nearly 6 feet of water. Alvin had made clear to me on previous trips to the back paddocks that you don't fuck up a rancher's dam. You don't piss in them, you don't... I knew, and I couldn't shoot a Roo in one and let him sink and rot and ruin the water. I put the gun down, took off my boots, and waded in. No one had told me that Roos go into water when they're being chased by dogs. They grab the dog, or a man for that matter, with their hands and rip his belly open with the huge claws on their hind feet. I dog paddled within a couple feet of the Roo. We both had to keep pushing off the bottom and popping up to keep our heads above water. We popped and bobbed several times, then I made my move. I got behind and on top of him, dug my heels into his hips and got my hands around his throat. He reached up and grabbed my wrists with both his hands, which were as big as mine. He grabbed me so tightly that I got bruises where his hands had been. I pushed him under, but he kept pushing off the bottom and coming up again. I was looking down straight into his eyes. They were filled with terror, and I was filled with things I'd never felt before. Bloodlust, triumph, alpha maleness. His eyes bulged out as I tightened my grip on his throat, and his tongue protruded from his mouth and turned blue and swelled up. He never took his eyes off mine until he finally stopped pushing off the bottom. I dragged him to the shore and stood over him. His body was full of holes, his belly half ripped open, his form crumpled and limp. His eyes were still open, bulging out and staring up at me. For a moment I couldn't break my eyes away from his dead stare. My mind started spinning like a whirlpool, and I felt like I was being carried down into its vortex. I threw up. Then I started crying. I couldn't stop myself. In a kind of fireman's carry, I lugged him all the way back to the bocce. Kangaroos are very bottom heavy, and trying to carry one on your shoulders through nearly a mile of scrubby bush was a major enterprise. He kept slipping down my back, and my feet got tangled in his entrails, which had started to spew out of his belly wounds. I arrived at the bocce an hour later, covered in kangaroo shit and blood and dried slime. When I told Alan what I'd done, he screamed at me, "You crazy fucking stupid motherfucker. No one gets in the water with a wounded Roo. You're my fucking responsibility, and I don't want your fucking guts hanging out of your belly on account of I took you hunting Roos. Stupid fucking Yank." My throat filled with lumps, and all I could manage to shout back was, "Shut up." We drove back to the house in silence. To this day, I've never hunted again except when I needed meat. I didn't even skin the Roo. I buried him out next to Judy.